Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Krista Moore Show. This show is brought to you by K Coaching, and I just wanted to see if you noticed our new theme, Race to Amazing. It's the Race to Amazing series. I want to make sure that in the 30 minutes that you have decided to spend with us, that you are getting what you need on the fast track. So whatever we talk about, whatever subjects and whoever I'm interviewing, we are able to help you get on the fast track to your success. In 30 minutes, you've got the information you need to take action. Now, there is a little bit of a buzz out there about family-friendly work cultures and how important that is to create. And so I wanted to bring to you an expert on that and a friend of mine, and her name is Dr. Sharon Hull. And Sharon, are you there? She is a retired family practitioner and also an executive coach. Hi, Sharon. Great to see you
here. Thank you.
Now, first I have to let everyone know that you are dialing in from a hotel room, but you've done a great job of masking that for the show.
Okay, good to know. It was a bit of a lighting challenge.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time out. I know you're traveling and you're at a conference, but it also indicates to me that you also believe this is an important subject for everyone. So I would love for you to give a little bit of a background on yourself so that they can get to know you a little better.
I'm happy to do that, Krista, and thank you for the chance to join you today. I am a family physician of about 30 years, and I've had a career that has spanned everything from solo rural family practice in the community near where I grew up to becoming a leader in academic medical centers in 3 different universities. And what I call my encore career has been to become an executive coach. So that's it's the short version of my journey. And I'm happy to be here and share that perspective today.
Well, and one thing that I really find fascinating is the number of people that you coach in a given year. And so the exposure that you get to family culture and challenges that employees are having in the workplace is just phenomenal. So you're bringing such a wealth of information from those experiences. And when we talk about a family-friendly environment or family-friendly culture, what exactly does that mean? What does that mean to you?
So what it means to me is colored by my own experiences of being both a family physician and an employer in a number of situations. I think for me, it means that when somebody comes to work with me, for me, whatever that relationship is, they know that they're seen as a whole human being. And it's not that family comes first, but that wherever possible, family matters.
Yes.
Even in the workplace. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, and I often think too, I was thinking about this subject last night and just remembering the old days, let's say, when the family unit was different and there weren't as many women in the workforce. They were maybe stay-at-home moms. The need for the workplace to even be thinking about family-friendly just wasn't a subject because they didn't even need to think about that so much. And I think that since there's been such a shift, and you probably know all the statistics in terms of how many working moms there are, that makes a big difference in how companies need to shift and change because of that. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's interesting that you ask. We just came to the place in medicine where women outnumber men in the workforce in medicine. So that's I've lived that over my 30 years. But medicine's not the only place that's happening, and it's not about outnumbering or competing, but it is about there are a lot of folks in the workforce who have caregiving issues, who have people that they're responsible for, and they want to have that recognized, not necessarily to the detriment of their employer, but just so that they can make their lives work.
Sure.
I've watched my mom. I grew up in the days of old, if you will, and my mom worked, but that was not necessarily the norm. And I remember her saying to bosses and talking at home about the fact that she had said to her boss, my child is sick and I'm going to be home with her.
Mm-hmm.
I was that child. And so I didn't know at the time how hard that was to say in the workplace, but I watched her say it, and I've had the privilege of talking to her about it over my 30 years of working.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that change. You know, in medicine, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I was told that I was part of the feminization of medicine because women wanted work-life balance, and it was this new term, and everybody wanted to sort of minimize it. And what I began to say after having been accused of being part of that is, look, I'm seeing as many men come in who want to go to their kids' soccer games as I am women.
Yes.
And it became apparent to me that it wasn't just a women's issue. We just happened to be on the forefront in that era. But it affects all of us. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that's what I really wanted to address today. You know, why should companies be thinking about and changing perhaps their culture to be more family friendly? What are some of the return on investments, so to speak, or why is that just the way to be today?
Well, you know, a business person, and I have been a business person, understands that the bottom line doesn't go away. You still have to make your product, put it out into the world, and make a profit in order to stay in business. None of what I'm suggesting actually takes away from that. I think it's more of a both and. And so really what we're talking about is, what can a given business do that will let them recognize the human beings who work with them and do what's possible in their environment to actually make it possible for people to thrive? Now, why would they want to do that? There's actually good data that shows family-friendly work policies actually reduce turnover and improve loyalty and improve productivity in the bottom line. So that's a business case, not just a, well, it's the right thing to do kind of case.
Yeah, it's definitely a business case. And, you know, I'm going to give you an example because I have shared this story before. I'm not sure you've heard this one, but I remember when I worked for corporate America, I was a working mom. I had 2 kids in middle school. I was totally stressed out trying to find that work-life balance, but I wanted to be super mom, you know, superwoman, and that's just what it was. And I remember traveling, and I was gone for like 3 days. I came back to the office before I went home, and my boss came in and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, I got to get through these emails." And I think it was like 4 o'clock. And he suggested, he didn't suggest, he pretty much told me, he said, "I want you to go home and be with your family because I know that you've been gone. And I want you to take the company's credit card and take them out to dinner on me and let them know how much I appreciate what you do for the company." And I'm like,
Wow.
you know, so this, either he was really, really smart and knew how to motivate, but I tell people that just that one act of kindness and taking my family into consideration, I bet I gave him the best work for the next, I was high on that for the next 6 months. It wasn't just that night feeling proud and accomplished. I mean, it really made a big difference. And I just wanted to share that personal example. And it doesn't cost very much.
Well, that's what I was going to say in response, that I've not heard this story from you. I've heard several of your stories, but that's a new one. I'm touched. So you saw me kind of grab my heart here in a good way. That touches me. I know it had to touch you. And it didn't cost him anything more than taking your family out to dinner one evening. But the return for him was your loyalty. I'm guessing you gave him, you probably give 110% all the time. Maybe it bumped up to 150 for 6 months because of that one thing. But the other thing that that did for you is it gave you a chance to say to your family, my work recognizes this.
That was just as important for me.
It wasn't just that you gave him, but you could reduce the stress on you because your family had a sense of his loyalty to them.
Well, I have to add something.
Okay.
That experience that I had, that was given to me, I felt it.
Yes.
I'm talking about it 20 years later.
Yes.
That's the kind of impact it had on me. And I have paid that forward. Joyce was sitting here reminding me of a time that we went to dinner with her family, and I picked up the tab and I just said, I just want to thank you guys for, supporting Joyce in her career and working with me. I mean, so I guess my point there being is, once we feel that from our work culture, we're going to do the same for others. And that makes it contagious.
Well, it does make it contagious. I love the idea of paying things forward. And this is an example of that. I had experiences when I was practicing medicine of people who had employers who did that and people who had employers who didn't. Those who did could find themselves coming in for routine health care, preventive health care. They could bring their kids in if they needed to be seen. They could deal with children's illnesses without having childcare issues. The folks who didn't have that kind of employment situation struggled to get their own health care met and that of those they loved.
Well, and think about that for a moment. If you're in a non-family friendly culture and you're sick yourself personally, you might still go to work because you don't have any more vacation days.
Yes.
Or, you're afraid that your boss is not going to be happy.
Right.
And what good is that, right? So that's coming into work when you're sick and getting everybody else sick. I mean, look what that does for productivity, right?
Family physician in me really responds to that, because everybody in the workplace needs to get seen because they're all sick because one person came to work.
And you know what? I remember work environments where I showed up sick.
Yes.
Because I was afraid that my boss wouldn't understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that happens in lots of workplaces. In medicine, we struggle with that because we have to remind the people we're training. I teach in medical schools, and we have to remind them that if they come to work sick, they might actually be the source of an infection for the next 10 people that they have to see. That's right. Not a good thing for a doctor to do. So
yeah, I know of a nurse practitioner that told me, I think she worked at UNC, that she would get fired if she didn't get the flu shot. I mean, that was like a requirement.
Right.
So that kind of makes sense. When we talk about a family-friendly culture and why should companies create it, it almost seems like it's obvious, right? I mean, have an open heart, get to know your employees, understand what their family unit is, because everybody's family unit is different. Do you have any recommendations for, for kind of starting to make that shift and just getting to know your employees better and connecting with them more personally?
So that process is different for every employer. We all have different personalities. Some of us are outgoing and find it easy to just drop by somebody's desk and ask them how their life is going. Who are your kids? Tell me about them. We notice pictures on the wall. Some of us that comes more easily to than others. If you're one of those folks that it doesn't come easy for, making the effort to actually put time in your day as the boss, as the employer, where you're giving yourself time and energy to get to know your employees. Maybe it's coffee with the boss once a week and you invite 6 people. Maybe you don't like the cocktail party kind of big crowd thing. Create something where just people can sit and talk with you, get to know you as a human, and you get to know them a little bit. It takes time and it takes an investment.
Yeah, and one of the studies that I've read about and we incorporate in a lot of our leadership training is that employees leave because of their boss. Like, 82% of the time it's because of their boss, not because of the job. And also what employees are saying they want from their boss is they want to be respected, they want to be trusted, and they want to know that that boss cares. So gosh, those are 3 very tangible things that as leaders, we could start incorporating into our leadership style that could make a really big difference in maybe shifting this to more family friendly. I wanted to make a comment at this point, though. We've had a few comments coming in related to trust, and that sometimes it's the business owner or the boss that doesn't trust the employee and that they're actually working. So they don't, they want them to show up in the office and stay till 5 and don't trust that if, let's say they're an outside salesperson or whatever, or they're going to work from home for the day, that element of trust is missing, and that kind of really affects how they are receiving, just how they're receiving respect.
As an employer, is that what?
Yes.
Yes. So I think when I talk with employers about this, and I have talked with a number of business owners, and often the response is, but my business depends on production. My business depends on people showing up. Some businesses do, but you could sit with your employees if you wanted to start this process and you begin to get to know people. You can start by saying what matters to you in the workplace, and how would we know that work was still getting done? Do we measure the days that you're at your desk, the minutes you're at your desk, or do we measure the production of whatever the product or service?
Yeah, or the results, right? If the results are there.
It's a matter of, can you measure based on results, outputs rather than inputs if you're a business owner? And the other side of that coin is there will occasionally be people who do abuse family-friendly policies. And I think as managers, we often want to build a policy that manages to the lowest common denominator. We want to manage out that misuse behavior. As leaders, we almost have to flip that and say, I'm going to manage to the best people. And I'm going to have a mechanism to measure and give feedback to and address any outliers on the other end.
Yeah, boy, that's great advice. That really is, because that's not typically what happens today. The old traditional method might be, treat everybody the same, and how they're treating them just hasn't shifted or changed over the years.
Right.
Yeah, that's so true. One of the things that you mentioned is family-friendly policies, and I'd like you to drill down on that a little bit more. What would be 2 or 3 kind of policies that could be put into play or changed that could make a big difference in starting to build this type of culture?
Right. So I'm going to start my answer to that by talking about what it doesn't have to be. Small business owners in particular get concerned that what I'm talking about is what Google does. We have to put a full service cafeteria and a massage bar and a gym membership or a gym itself in the business. And those are not policies most small to medium-sized business owners can manage. It's just not feasible. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things like, okay, if a worker needs to take their child to the doctor, how are my PTO, my leave policies built? And do they in fact get penalized for doing that in ways that I might not have recognized? And just figuring out where those unintended consequences are of my leave policies, I could learn just by getting to know my faculty. My employees are often faculty, my apologies. Getting to know my workers and saying, what happens here that makes it easier for you? What happens here that makes it harder for you? And just listen. Start there. I remember being a small business owner, and I can tell you a story from my days of private practice if you'd like.
Please do.
Okay. So I had this belief that it was my moral obligation to provide health insurance to my employees. I'm a family physician. I'm sort of brought up that way. When I started my practice, I had 5 employees, and I asked them, what benefits matter to you? And I expected health insurance to be at the top.
Yes.
And I gave them a menu and told them they could add to the list. Nobody in that group chose health insurance. And they said, we all have health insurance from our spouse. That's not what matters. Having a small retirement program would matter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was stunned. I still had to struggle with, but I'm supposed to provide health insurance.
Yes.
This was 30 years ago, so the world was a little different then. But that experience of finding out from them what mattered was really powerful to me.
You're so spot on. And I love to coach and teach around just ask. Just ask.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you did. And you'll be surprised sometimes at the answer. I'm going to actually throw that out to business owners on the line today.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask your employees what's important to them when it comes to creating a family-friendly culture. You know, what policies maybe do need to shift and change because we all are part of a family unit. We're all human. You know, this work-life balance thing is just it's fake news. I don't know of any.
That in a moment.
We could definitely talk about that.
Yep.
You know, it's not easy. So our employer needs to, how many hours do we spend there versus at home? Our employer certainly needs to, you know, come along with us. Now, one thing that's shifting too, and I think it's important to recognize, is that there are a lot of businesses that are allowing employees to work from home.
Yes.
I feel like that's a policy that tends to be a little family friendly, right? Because now if I want to throw in the laundry while I'm, you know, waiting for a phone call, I have that flexibility. But the problem with that then is still goes back to that trust and that culture where the boss knows that they can trust that you're going to make up that time. You're not going to be stealing time from them, so to speak.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on that when creating a policy such as the ability to, you know, work remotely or work from home?
So I do have a couple of thoughts. I actually have a thought on either end of that spectrum. The first is that you have to agree what the measures of output are that matter. This is where you have to let the employer say what matters to them, right? That's a two-way question. So if you know what you're measuring and it's getting done, and you both agree that that's what matters, then the concept of stealing time is less important than is the production happening. And so I would just invite that conversation about what would make it friendlier for the employee, but what also is required by the employer for their business to succeed. You can't ask one question without the other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's
and it was
another,
interesting. It was interesting, Sharon, because as you were saying, ask what matters, someone was offering that same thought in a chat.
Yeah. You can't work one side without working the other. I mean, your audience is business owners. They understand that you can't just give away the store. I will say there's an alternate side to the question you asked, if you don't mind my going there. Sometimes with remote work, what happens is, yes, I can throw the laundry in, and yes, I can set my work hours, and maybe we've agreed on what production matters, and I'm meeting that. But the electronic access is almost as if I have to be on 24/7 as the employee.
There's some things that aren't so great about that, right?
Well, and this is where if you have that conversation about what's needed on both sides, and you're sensitive as the employer to, okay, if I send an email at 2 in the morning, am I expecting them to respond? Or can we set some ground rules up about that? I think it's important. I've coached a number of leaders who unintentionally, because they got to their work in email around 2 in the morning, they were creating a situation where their employees were like, can you please tell her to stop sending the emails at 2 in the morning?
Yeah. You know, I was talking to a client that was creating a policy around no response to email needed after 5:30. I mean, how cool is that, right? So, and it's just laying out that expectation that when you leave the office, you're done. I don't expect you to be sending messages after your kids go to bed. And I think that's awesome. But there's probably plenty of companies that don't expect their employees to send emails out after 5:30, but they still do. But why not just set set the policy, and
Yeah.
it leans on family friendly, and
Yes.
I think that goes miles.
Yes. I agree with you. I've coached some leaders who said, I had no idea they felt like they had to respond. Let me just get clear about that. And I've coached leaders to understand how to delay their emails so that if they get to them at 2 a.m., they can hit send, but it doesn't actually go to the inbox until 7 a.m. or
Yes. Yeah,
some
they
other
could set it up that way. And, I've known plenty of people that will send messages out at 2 a.m. in the morning just to prove that they're working. And that
Yes.
tells me that there's a culture of distrust going on, if that's the way that you're operating, right?
Well, and that's where your listeners are bringing up the issue of trust.
Yes.
There are symptoms of mistrust that can show up on either side. And that's where having that honest conversation about what matters for this business, what matters for this person in this business, how can we find a way to meet both?
Yeah.
My answer to the overarching policy question that you asked is it's usually a both and, not an either or answer that you have to look for.
But I say that we both agree that now's the time. Have those conversations.
Yes, the conversations don't cost you. You can have a conversation without committing. Sometimes I hear leaders say, if I open this can of worms, I'm going to be right down a rabbit hole and can't pull back.
Yes.
You could set this up so that you invite a series of conversations and say, I'm going to take everything I hear, I'm going to share my thoughts, and then I will propose a set of policies I think our business can not only survive with, really about thriving for
That's
both.
right. And it's okay to change them if they don't work. I was just recalling when Megan, my assistant, went on maternity leave. She was anxious to keep working. She felt like she was going to be bored at home and we could do a lot of things remotely. And I certainly was going to miss her physically being here at the office. And so I agreed to that. And we had an understanding of how much time she would put in. And it just did not work. Because I wasn't going to have a conference call and have a baby crying in the background, and I know she needs to be taking care of her child. It was too stressful. It didn't work. And so we changed the policy. And so I guess I'm just saying it's okay to try something, and it's okay to change it.
I would agree with you, and I will just say that the number of situations that people can bring to the workplace can't be predicted. I mean, you can't predict the number, but you also can't predict the complexity.
That's right.
We all have complex lives, and the needs of that employee who had a baby crying in the background are different than the 50-year-old gentleman who's taking care of his mother who's dying of cancer and is in hospice. So
yeah, and that hits home for me. You know that, Sharon, because, and most of my audience knows that last February, I moved my office home to take care of my mother for 3.5 months, who was in-home hospice in my house. Now, how fortunate that this was my business and that I could do that. And I remember, being so grateful that I could do this and had the freedom and flexibility. But I often thought, oh my goodness, if I worked at corporate America, I'd probably lose my job. Yep. But then, if I did, I did. This is what I needed to take care of. And I don't know, that just reminds me of
I knew that it would. There's a piece I want to say in response to that. Yeah. If you were in a corporation without family-friendly thinking about workplace policies, you might have lost your job, you might have left your job.
Yes.
And that comes back to the turnover piece.
Yes.
Corporate America would have invested a significant amount into your getting to wherever you were at that point. And to lose you would cost the company.
Yeah. And I'm familiar with a situation right now where an employer is not being family friendly or charging the other individual vacation time for something that really should be work related. And And this person's been there for years. So, and very valued. I mean, why would you even have a confrontation over that? It makes no sense, especially when the individual works way more than 8 hours a day. I mean, just crazy. But that stuff still exists today. And
It does.
and it will affect productivity, and it absolutely will affect, in the end, whether that person stays there or not.
Well, and I'll just, as I know we're coming to the end of our time, but I want to point out a word that you used. You said that that employee was very valued.
Yes.
What I'm hearing is that that employee was very valuable. May not
Bingo.
actually be being valued.
Extremely valuable, obviously not valued.
And if you go back to the study you cited, where what employees want is to be valued,
Yes.
what would it take? Yes.
Yeah, crazy.
Yes.
And actions speak louder than words. So sometimes, they might say, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do this, but then when it doesn't come through.
Right.
Well, this was a great conversation, and I think really, really needed. And I'm hopeful that our audience is able to have written down a few things that they can be thinking about, going back to their employees, having these healthy conversations around what matters, and ways to start to create more of this type of environment that's so necessary. So thank you for your expertise. I'd love to share a slide that shows your contact information, if you would, please. Let me see if we've got it up here. There it is. All right. So your email's on here, Sharon, and they certainly can get in touch with you. You have some fabulous blog posts on this subject with really great detail around what we've highlighted here today. So if anyone wants to get connected to that, please send her an email, and she'll make sure that you get the blog post or go to her blog site. Also, I would suggest following you on LinkedIn, because I certainly do, and I really like what you're sharing, and I think you're a fabulous writer, and I enjoy your posts. So I would encourage others to do the same.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I want to thank you for being our guest today, and also wanted our audience to know that if there's someone that you want to hear this recording, maybe your boss, then please go to our new platform where we're putting all of our past shows, and that is go to stage/channel/KristaMoore.com. Let me show that. So that's, if you go to that location, you can watch any of our past shows, and we're populating the ones over the years into that site now. So this one, by the way, Sharon, will be posted there probably within the next hour, and you can certainly direct people there. That'd be great.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, so to everyone, thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for many of our shows this year as we continue to help you get on the fast track to your success. And we'll talk to you later. Thanks.